Hello and welcome to this DC Velocity and Supply Chain Exchange webcast. I'm Dave Maloney, the Group Editorial Director. Thanks for joining us today. This is the fifth in a series of events we will host throughout 2024 called Future-Proofing Operations, Transforming Fulfillment Webcast Series. It's sponsored by Ocado Intelligent Automation. These webinars will give you behind-the-scenes access into some of the most successful and efficient fulfillment operations. You'll also have some insights into how industry leaders have addressed their biggest challenges and future-proofed their operations. And you'll have the opportunity to ask our experts for help on the obstacles holding back your business. Today's webcast is Optimizing Operation Space and Productivity. First, here are some tips to help you connect and participate in our webcast today. It's designed to be interactive between you and our presenters, so later in the program, we'll have a question and answer session to allow you to ask our presenters questions relevant to the topics that we discussed today. Just type your question into the text box in the console, hit the submit question button, and we'll get to as many of those questions during our presentation as we can. The slides will advance automatically throughout the event. If slides are not advancing, please press your F5 key or Control R on your keyboard to refresh your console. And we recommend you disable any of your pop-up blockers. If you're experiencing any kind of technical problem, visit our webcast help guide by clicking on the help link that's below the media player. So joining us on our journey today are Eric Hovan and Chris Rowland. Eric is Director of Sales at Ocado Intelligent Automation, and Chris is the Vice President of Sales and Consulting at Advanced Intralogistics. You can find more information about both of our presenters on your console. So to begin our presentation today, I will now turn the floor over to Eric. Eric?
Thanks, Dave. I'm Eric Hovan. We're thrilled to sponsor this webcast series with DC Velocity. Before we move into the session with Chris Rowland, I'd like to introduce the audience to Ocado Intelligent Automation, for any of you who are unfamiliar with us. Ocado Intelligent Automation, part of Ocado Group, is a global technology developer and operator delivering the world's most advanced warehouse operations software, hardware, and processes at scale. OIA is expanding Ocado's world-leading e-commerce, fulfillment, and logistics solution for online grocery retail that has been used for more than 20 years to industries and applications that are beyond online grocery. Six River Systems, also a part of Ocado Group, is a leading wall-to-wall fulfillment solutions provider. Our highly configurable warehouse fulfillment solution combines software as a service with our autonomous mobile robot, Chuck, to boost warehouse productivity, grow profits, and reduce operational risk. Chucks operate in more than 120 facilities throughout the US, Canada, and Europe, fulfilling millions of units each week for companies including GXO, DHL, DSW, Orvis, and Foot Locker. As David Maloney referenced, we're delighted to have Chris Rowland from Advanced Intralogistics with us today to share his insights on optimizing operation space and productivity. Chris, thanks for joining us today. For the people here who may not be familiar with Advanced Intralogistics, please tell us about the business and the type of work your organization does.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Eric. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to our conversation today. So Advanced Intralogistics, we're a full-service integrator. We're located in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but we do projects all over the nation, coast to coast. We're focused on data-driven solutions, and those solutions can be hardware, software, or operations, or a combination of all three. We do greenfields, brownfields, and we do fully automated systems all the way down to manual systems. I'll keep it short and sweet because I know we have limited time here today. So if anybody wants to learn a little bit more about us, our team, our product offerings, please join us at advancedintralogistics.com or hit us up on LinkedIn.
Thank you, Chris. So you mentioned a lot of different solutions that you have. You're working with a bunch of different companies trying to solve problems. What kinds of problems keep bubbling up to the top that you're hearing from companies?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, Eric, I don't think I'm gonna blow anybody's mind by saying that like labor challenges, storage capacity, and then like throughput efficiencies are really the topic of every conversation. I think one thing that's changed a little bit in the landscape over the last year, maybe year and a half, is the storage capacity piece of it. And it feels like it's a holdover a little bit from COVID. We had the supply chain issues that kind of we struggled with all throughout COVID. We have people that bought things that they thought that they needed. They're now coming through, and now people have to store a lot more capacity in the same amount of space. So that's kind of bubbled up to the top a little bit. But labor challenges always a big subject. And then how do we efficiently get things in the door? How do we store them? How do we retrieve them? How do we pack them? How do we ship them in the most efficient way possible?
It always comes back to those basics, doesn't it?
It does. Yes, absolutely.
I know for many companies, it kind of seems overwhelming to even start to address some of these problems. What are some of the steps that companies can take to begin addressing what these problems are and how to go look for solutions?
Yeah, so we have a lot of conversation with folks, and I think that as long as the primary focus is around what are the bottlenecks in the system, and then what are the goals of trying to accomplish those bottlenecks. Every system does have bottlenecks in them. So what you have to try to accomplish is what's the best way to get product through those, right? And then, secondly to that is data. I'm a data guy. Data-driven solutions is kind of, my tagline, right? And so I'm a big advocate of letting the data tell the story. I think a lot of people can get caught up in confirmation bias, and data can actually exacerbate that for some people, right? So if you kind of sit back, don't have writer's pride, let that data tell the story that it needs to tell, then you'll end up with a solution that works best for the operations.
It makes sense. It makes sense. It definitely it cuts through a lot of biases and opinions and feelings when you get down to
Absolutely.
the data, for sure. So as you look to solve these problems, you mentioned storage, labor, all those types of issues, addressing where you have a bottleneck and where it's worth attacking. What are the scenarios when you start to look at fulfillment automation to solve those problems?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question because automation is kind of like it's a huge subject, right? And it can be anything from something small to something large. And so if you just look at automation at a service level, it's implementing something to take the place of a repetitive task that has a low amount of exceptions, right? That's kind of my definition of it. And if you look at something like a WMS, and so if somebody's picking off of paper and they want to implement some sort of automation, that might work for a company of 10 people, right? I mean, there's not too many situations where we wouldn't recommend that you have some sort of software solution as far as your inventory and picking goes. So I think that it's more about the buckets of where it goes along to, right? So you have kind of that low end solution, and then you kind of go into more of a mid-range automation solution, and then an upper end solution. That can be $10,000 to $100 million, realistically. And so I think, parsing those up throughout the conversations is really, the crux of the conversation. But as far as when we, suggest automation to people, it really just depends on their over operational goals, I guess, would be a short answer for that.
It makes sense. There are always challenges in deploying automation, right? And looking at tasks and changing the way people have done things for a long time. How do you look to help a company overcome those barriers to a successful implementation when you're doing an automation project?
Yeah, so I think it starts from the beginning. I think a common misstep that a lot of automation teams make, and this would be the whole team that's implementing the project, right, is in the beginning not bringing in the right people at the right times, right? So from an integrator standpoint, possibly the salesperson didn't bring in the manufacturer, or didn't bring in project management early enough, or didn't bring in engineering enough. And then from an end user standpoint, maybe it's an executive team that didn't bring in operations early enough, or vice versa. And then a huge one is not bringing in IT early enough, especially if it's an automated solution that has software, right? So getting all of those folks involved early in the process eliminates that knowledge transfer, because there's a large amount of knowledge transfer, right? I know when I did direct sales, it was me, my counterpart, and then maybe a couple other people, and we knew everything about it, right? But once you get that PO and you turn it over to execution, getting everybody up to speed is challenging. So that's my biggest piece of advice is on the front side, get people involved early so that you can avoid that, or you can bridge that gap would be a better way to put that. And then once you go to execution from the pre-sales, you kind of have to have that same group it's a different group, but the same group throughout those departments, through the duration. It's interesting that we're talking about this. We're going through a deployment right now that's having some challenges, right? We're on the 1 yard line. That's normally when everything bubbles up. I was talking to one of our consultants last week, and I love the way he put it, because he was just, in the heat of the moment said, everybody that's involved, we need one person to live it, to love it, to own it, right? And I think it was just a good way to put that. And I mean, it's well said, because if you have a champion in every single company, it's going to be successful, right?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I know that, something that I've had a lot of success with, I think it's important, is that post go live, let's have the people that started this get back together. What were our goals when we started? Did we achieve those? What were the metrics we had to make sure that we were successful? And I think it's essential. I also like where you said bringing in the operations team, right? Because if those people are involved in hearing the challenges, the reason decisions were made, how things were done, that can only help with adoption once things start to go live. So I think you're spot on with those answers.
Yeah. And I think just, everybody keeping their eye on the same goal, right? I think, when tensions get high, and they can, just reminding everybody, hey, we're all on the same team. We all have the same goal in place. Once we're in the post-mortem stage, then we can all get together and yell at each other, right? But right now, let's just hunker down and get it done.
Yeah, completely agree with you there. So as you look across projects that companies bring you, the problems they're trying to solve, what are the type of environments and situations where you start to think that an AMR solution might be the right way to address the issues?
Yeah, so AMRs are interesting. I did an interview probably about 4 years ago, and somebody asked me about my opinion about AMRs. And to be fair, this was like 4 years ago. It wasn't well received, and I think the reason why is because AMRs were a very expensive solution. They were still slow at the time, and all those things. So getting the business case was challenging. But here, just 4 short years later, I think we have a lot better solutions out there. Especially with the way some of the RAS models are implemented now. You can have an ROI on day one, right? And they're faster, better, cheaper, right? And so I think that's an exciting time for AMRs. Some of the things that we look for when a company is talking about automation is, especially people that already have a little bit of automation. Maybe they have a WMS, maybe they're picking off a RF, things like that. That lends itself really well to AMRs, because they already understand the technology. They understand, implementing it and everything else. This is kind of dipping their toe into the mechanical side of that. They've already got the software side. Now they're doing the mechanical side. End users that don't want to change their infrastructure, they want to utilize their existing racking, their existing packing stations. All of that is a very good, use case for customers like that. And then another thing about AMRs that I think people will benefit, and especially those people that are dipping their toe in automation, is I think that there can be a fear of how the associates will accept the automation. But what I've found is once it's in place, those operators, the employee retention is higher. The satisfaction, I think, is higher. And then the training is a lot improved as well. So those are kind of the things that we look for when we look at deploying an AMR solution.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've been involved now for 5.5 years in doing those, and I think that's pretty spot on. It's an easy way to get a lot of those benefits and start dipping your toe into automation, while at the same time being something you can pick up and move if you change locations, and something that's flexible enough to address changes in your business that may come around. So I would agree with you on that. Looking at, another part of what OIA delivers is our larger Ocado fulfillment system, with a dense hive storage. And what are the types of environments where you start to get to that ASRS, dense storage, high automation level solution? When does that make sense?
Yeah, so that's a little bit more of a difficult question, right? And I say that I'm hedging a little bit because, again, I'm going to go back to the data portion of it. I'm a data guy, so it's like, I let that lead me to the solutions. But if we just talk in general terms, a customer that is struggling with storing as many SKUs as they want to store and not getting the throughput out, or maybe the picking efficiencies aren't what they want, and they have like a clear height of, let's say, 30 feet or more. They got people that are 25, 30, 35 people that are either doing a picking, a replenishment, or a packing function. I think that's where you start to have those conversations. One more piece of it is the SKU velocity, right? So if they have a traditional 80-20 Pareto curve, and what I mean by that is if 80% of their picks come from 20% of their SKUs, if that aligns pretty well and they have a long tail on that, then that at least is a good conversation to have. Now, once you get into the data, you might alter your opinion, but I think that's where you start.
That makes a ton of sense. I just got to say, I really appreciate somebody with as much experience as you, who works with the wide variety of projects that yourself and Advanced Intralogistics work on, being here for this. So thank you very much for joining in. Appreciate the answers to all the questions we kind of had planned out on this. And I believe we have a few that have been submitted. So if it's okay, I'll throw it back to you, Dave, to answer a few of the questions that have come during our conversation.
Perfect.
Great. Thanks, Eric and Chris. We do have some times for you to still get your questions into us. So if you have a question that you'd like to ask, we'll get to as many of those as we can. And if we don't get a chance to ask it or answer that question during the presentation, we can have somebody follow up with you to get you an answer. Let me take a look at what we've received. This first question deals with the reality today that a lot of different types of robotic solutions are put into the same facility. So the question is, what are some important lessons that you've learned while advising your clients through deployments involving multiple robotic solutions?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think that actually is the question, right, of everything that we've talked about here today. I'm kind of going to go back to a couple of earlier points that we talked about. I think data is huge, right? Getting the right people involved early in the process, following the story of the data, and then make sure that you're focused on the actual problem. I've been in rooms before where people want to start with the solution and then focus on the problem afterwards. And I really think the way to drive at the right solution is to focus on the problem of like, what are we trying to accomplish, right? And then out of that problem statement, how do we accomplish it? Coming up with those iterations that are very collaborative between the integrator and the end customer, I think are super important. But getting that front part right is the biggest lessons learned that I've seen probably in my life. And then, past that, just, choosing the right partner. And I think that, even the first part of the question that I answered, goes right into this part of the question too. So, who is the right partner? I think a right partner is somebody that's willing to sit down with you, collaborate with you, have some challenges, right? Of, just if the status quo is this, can we challenge that? Is it right to change it or is it not right to change it? I mentioned writer's pride earlier in the talk as well. And I think that that's big, and people just being able to sit down, having conversations, and again, focusing on the goal of what's the best solution and going forward. And I think that's some of the biggest lessons learned that I've seen is really getting the front part right on the foundation person, right? So if you get the foundation right, the building's going to go pretty well.
Great. Thank you. Another question is, do you have to be a big player in order to automate? In past years, you kind of had to do that, but with solutions today, do you have to be that big player for automation?
Yeah, no, another great question. And, we talked about this a little earlier, is that, automation is all kinds of things, right? And so even like a WMS implementation for a company that might have 10 or 15 people, it's not going to cost that much. I think that is really, a good entry point for automation. And then the buckets that we talked about past that of AMR solutions that have RAS models where you don't have to lay out a huge capital expenditure is a good next step. And then once your company grows and you get to a point of a fully automated solution, you kind of know what that process is, right? So I guess to answer the overarching question, no, the companies of all shapes and sizes would benefit from automation.
Yeah,
Right.
Chris, and I'll add to that we have implementations of our AMR solution with as few as 7 or 8 robots that can still provide a great benefit and give people what they're looking for. But those people can also grow over time, whether it's for peak or as volumes increase, or for our 3PL customers when they add new clients into the building. And we have sites that have built up to 150 autonomous robots moving around. So it's nice that you can now size systems to meet the needs, and it isn't just the big players who have to have a ton of volumes or a retail presence before they're able to afford these large solutions. You can have very affordable solutions that provide benefit even at smaller sizes.
Yeah, absolutely. So flexibility and scalability right now with automation is huge, and there's a lot of equipment manufacturers like yourself that is making that realized.
Right. I think that scalability and flexibility are ideal, and today's systems offer that. Gentlemen, I'm sorry to say that we are out of time. We've hit the limit for what we wanted to be able to do today, and so we do encourage people to still send in their questions because we can have someone follow up with you directly. So if we haven't had a chance to address what question you might have had, go ahead and send that in. And we also encourage you to go to ocatointelligentautomation.com for more information on also what you've seen today, and lots more there as well. And shortly after our live event, we'll also send you an email reminder so you can access this presentation on demand. You can view it once again, or you can share it with a colleague. Also, plan to be with us on August 22nd for our next in the series. It's Expedite and De-Risk Automation Deployment. And our featured speaker there will be Brian Shuckle. He's the Vice President of Strategic Accounts with SVT Robotics. Again, that's on August 22nd. Register for that event and join us again. Eric and Chris, thank you very much for an informative session. And we also like to thank you, our audience, for being with us. We know that your time is very valuable, and we hope that you've walked away with some good ideas to better manage your own supply chains. For all of us at DC Velocity and Supply Chain Exchange, I'm Dave Maloney. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.